Hi, my name is Brian Kilcourse, and I'm a managing partner at RSR Research over here in the United States. And I'm here with Steve Allen, and we're going to pick up a conversation that we had a little while ago on the subject of logistics and direct-to-consumer and returns. And today we're going to focus a little bit on returns. I'm going to introduce myself a little bit longer, and then I'm going to turn it over to Steve. He can tell me all about himself and his job. I've been in retail since, believe it or not, the 1970s. I was a CIO for a number of years, and I'm a founding member of RSR. We've been in business since 2007. And what we do is study the business use cases that drive the adoption of technology. So we can talk about this endlessly, but I'll just suggest that you go to our website at www.rsrresearch.com. All of our research is free to you. We'd love to hear from you and find out what you think about it. So now, Steve, how about yourself? Tell us a little bit about your background and what you're doing now in work.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. So I'm Steve Allen. I'm now VP for Europe and Asia Pac inside Metapack. Metapack is a specialist organization that looks at carrier management solutions and also now starts to focus really on the post-ship side of things. So making it easier for people to be able to track what's happening with their shipments, but also, as we've just alluded to, be able to make returns that much easier. And something that we will expand on is more sustainable as well. And I've been involved in e-commerce now for probably too long, and it's good fun, but it's constantly evolving. And the older you get, the longer it takes to learn.
Do you remember, Steve, when we thought that everything that began in one channel was going to end in one channel?
Absolutely.
Our naivete was rather stunning, I have to say. But you know, this brings us to the context of our discussion. As we were talking, well, not too many weeks ago, we were talking about the explosion of omni-channel transacting. So that consumers begin their transactions in one place and they end at the other. And a big component of that, of course, is direct to consumer, which opens up all kinds of possibilities, but also buy online, pick up in store, and its cousin, buy online, return in store. Retailers seem to be have been caught flat-footed when it comes to the whole returns angle. And of course, we were all doing everything we could in a rush. And when in our research in 2019, when we asked retailers if they thought that omni-channel retailing was important from a fulfillment perspective, they said, yeah, it's probably important. But at that time, it was like 10% of the business. It wasn't 40% of the business or 50% of the business. Then came the pandemic, of course, and everything changed. The world changed. And in that context, the pandemic was really an accelerator. It caused retailers to have to develop processes and systemize them much, much more quickly than they're used to doing. And as a result of that, we all know this, they did what they had to. They didn't necessarily do it very well. And that has created an opportunity for solutions providers everywhere to help them to right that ship, to optimize those processes, make them profitable. And I know that's a big part of your business, Steve, is that you help retailers get it right. The flip side of that, as I said, is returns. And we just finished a store benchmark study to understand the state of the store in the context of all this new activity on the side of the consumer. And retailers have discovered that the store is a great place to return product. Now, there's a bunch of good reasons for it. One of the good reasons for it is it's an opportunity to interact with the customer, to cross-sell, to upsell, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, in the UK, of course, not Waitrose, but John Lewis has been doing this for quite some time, doing a really good job of it. The rest of the world has caught on to this and they understand the notion. So the objective is to get the consumer back into the store where perhaps you can conduct some more business. There are all kinds of challenges with that. One of the challenges is what to do with the inventory. We'll talk about that at some point. But I want to go back to why returns are happening and just remind you of some of the data we talked about last time. I'm going to turn it over to you for a little while. But of the top 10 reasons, this is according to Gartner and Coresight research, of the top 10 reasons that a product is returned, 8 of them are clearly controllable by the retailer. And they're not what you think they are. The number one reason the product is not returned is the quality is not what was expected. That's the number one reason. And the number two reason, which really surprised me, was the color or the product description did not match what was on the website. Now that's very fixable. That's something a retailer should take care of.
Yeah.
The third one was issues with product fit. We're all, of course, we're aware of that. We as consumers do something called bracketing. And I wear a certain size Levi jean. And if I think my body shape has changed, which it did in COVID, then I might buy a size up or maybe 2 sizes up, and I'll return 1 or 2 of those things. So issues with the product fit. And retailers have an opportunity to fix that online by that, true to size gradation that you see in some websites. The wrong item sent. Well, that's just tragic. That's a fulfillment problem. And that needs to be cleaned up. Product arrived damaged. Yet another problem that should be controllable, meaning it was shipped poorly. We've all gotten a box from Amazon where the sides are busted out and whatever was inside that box is broken. Is broken, yeah. And so this brings up all kinds of other issues. So the retailer and the shipper have something to do with about that. The next one is the product has arrived later than expected. Again, theoretically controllable. We finally get to something that isn't controllable, and that's bought to try. This is the one thing that people on my side of the fence love to chat about. They say, this is the problem. Well, in fact, it's the 7th problem. It's not the first one, not even close. People buy things just to try them out. And it is an issue, but there's an opportunity to solve that in a different way. Get them in the store so that they can try it there. The product didn't work. Again, a controllable issue, clearly a QA issue. Another uncontrollable one is the product is no longer needed. I can imagine. I happen to buy musical toys. I like expensive musical toys. And so I'll order it from my favorite online retailer. And if it's back ordered and I have to wait more than 2 weeks, I will lose interest. I'll say, why did I want that in the first place? So I don't need the product anymore now, and I'll ask for a refund. And finally, one more controllable reason, it's found a better price elsewhere. Again, a sin which retailers should be able to rectify. Does this ring true with you, Steve? Is this?
You know what? It's just incredible. You've read that list out, and the wrong color because the website isn't good enough because it doesn't depict exactly what the coloration is. I mean, this could be a number of reasons, and it could be that I viewed it on my mobile phone when I was on the train, and the train was rattling around, and it looked great at the time. And then I thought it was red, and in fact, it's terracotta. There's a difference. But that's down to the retailer as well to make sure that it says it's terracotta, that it's not red. And I think, it's like with all of that type of thing. Wrong sizing, okay, is the thing that we see all of the time. And what we've managed to do, instead of sending that back, waiting for your money, and then ordering another one, we now offer a live exchange. So if it's the wrong size, but you want the same product, but just a different size, you just exchange it online.
Right.
So the beauty of that as well for the retailer is there's no bank transaction charges for putting the money back on that person's credit card. And we've seen a huge uptake of live exchanges.
That makes great sense to me because, of course, anytime you either physically or digitally touch a product, you're spending money. You need to understand this. You're spending money. And that's a perfect example of that.
And I think the other thing is as well is that what we've managed to do, with these returns is we've helped the retailers to track the return now.
Yeah.
One of the biggest problems is, and one of the biggest call center headaches is, I've sent this product back 2 weeks ago. I still haven't got my money.
Yeah.
Well, if you track it from the point of that first scan, where you either take it to a drop-off point or whatever it might be, then at least and that gives visibility to the warehouse as well. So that's really important. Now, your comments about getting people back into store, absolutely valid. Marks and Spencer's now have iBeacons in their store. So they will know, and I get it on my phone. They welcome me into the store with my phone. They know that I'm coming back with a return item because you have to tell them you're coming back with a return now. But they suggest a route to take you to get you.
I love that. So away from they will lead you through the store, and guess what? You'll probably look at products while you're going.
Exactly. And that, to me, is incredibly clever marketing, but clever use of technology that is not, that people call it invasive. It's not invasive. It's a welcome. But they say, oh, we suggest you go to the left because it's the easiest route. Well, believe it or not, the left is men's sweaters. So I might stop and have a look. So, you know, the technology side of it is certainly picking up. The one about getting people into store, though, we have just signed a new carrier that will go within London to your house with a bicycle. And as long as the item obviously fits within this box that's on the bicycle, they will take it back to the store for you.
Wow.
So that means then less carbon emissions because you're not going to get in your car or jump on the tube or jump on the bus to take that item back. This is a free service that's, and I can't say which retailers at the moment, but certain retailers are now using.
I love that. You know, we alluded to this in the beginning when we were talking about the volume of these things that are coming up. And one of the things is you and I have chatted about before, is that there's a tremendous amount of activity around getting the product to the consumer and getting the product back from the consumer. And the consumer themselves are spending time, energy, and all the rest of it. So this brings up this whole issue of, let's call it responsible processing.
Yeah.
What's the most efficient way to get it into the hands of the consumer in the first place? And what's the most efficient way to get it back if it turns out that they don't want it? And this inevitably brings up the issue of sustainability. One of the things we found out in a piece of research that we did is that people in my generation are not sensitive to this. You know, boomers, you know, I guess the good news is we're all dying. So we get us out of the way and move on to the next generation. But the latest generation, the Generation Z,
yeah,
those people are very aware, and they make product decisions based on sustainability factors, which retailers are barely aware of.
Yep.
One of them is this. So I assume this is becoming a big part of your business, is helping retailers to understand how to manage that.
Yeah, and I think, you know, you brought up the thing about it hasn't arrived within the timescales I expected. That's a big problem, because the thing is, you can build a delivery option tool within inside your website that gives us options with various carriers, various timelines. You can have it on a particular date at a particular time. That's great as long as the solution and the carriers are all on the same page. And, you know, there's nothing worse than you order something and you hear nothing back. Now, that is an outbound issue, but it is also this, going back to this returns issue as well. You need to understand that that item that you want to track going back, you can track to the point where it has actually hit the warehouse. And I think, you know, we are trying to help retailers to become smarter on both outbound and inbound tracking as well. Giving notifications to people is incredibly important. They don't have to be multiple, because people get fed up with their phone pinging. But the fact is, if you say, we have received your item, your refund is now being processed. That to me is perfect.
Yeah, well, knowledge is the first thing. So visibility is key. And there's a whole bunch that we could talk about here. Let me start with the systems issues. Retailers are notorious for not being very good about data sharing, but you're talking about an intentionally, what's the right word, porous relationship between shippers and manufacturers and retailers. They all need to be sharing information so that they can create a visibility quotient, which is going to help them to optimize that part of the business. Are you seeing breakdowns in those kind of old parochial points of view, or is it still a slog?
I worry sometimes when certain carriers won't give data.
Yeah.
And the reason they won't give data is because they've built their own solution.
Right.
But the retailers aren't strong enough to say, fine, if you are not going to give us that data, we will not continue our contract with you.
You'll find somebody else. Yeah, who will.
I'm not being funny. You know, if you look just on the Metapack platform, we have over 400 carriers.
Right.
And surely that's enough.
One would think, and it also, that, let's call it, that many options will prevent retailers from doing that which they probably shouldn't do. The vast majority of them shouldn't consider managing their own rolling stock.
Absolutely.
Gets into a business that they don't really know very much about.
No, and that's where 3PLs come into their own.
Right.
I mean, the likes of John Lewis, Marks and Spencer's, Macy's, probably the bigger US stores, they've got it right because they've had plenty of years of practice to do it. Walmart is a prime example.
Probably the best example. Or maybe the exception that proves the rule, right?
Yeah, but you know, Amazon is probably as good, although you know they're starting to come under a lot of pressure now because purely for the fact that some of their online suppliers aren't reacting like they should do because they've become complacent, I think is the word. So I think, you know, if you look at the way that the systems are working, they work really well as long as all those three component elements that you mentioned. So the retailer gets it right on the front end, they use the right carrier contracts, okay, and they allow that then to work with the sustainable carriers, et cetera, that moves it through to the point where everybody is happy. But that is almost the exception to the case because our reports have shown that 49% of consumers won't return something, they'll hang on to it because it is such a pain to return it.
To return it. Well, isn't that interesting? 49%.
Yeah.
Wow.
I know. Look at that.
A little surprising.
It is surprising, but you see, what's happened is there's been this paradigm shift away from a label in the bag. That was an easy return.
Yeah.
Peel the label off, put it back on the bag, take it to your local drop-off point, be it Royal Mail, be it USPS, whatever. Okay, it's done. It's out of your hands. Now, the retailers are making it more difficult because they don't want the returns. So
well, this gets into a different problem, and we need to talk about that.
You know, so they don't want them, so they make it more difficult. And do you know what they're starting to do? They're making you pay to return your item.
That's right. That's right. Well, and we talked to somebody, I can't reveal the name. Somebody is a startup company that's their entire business proposition is to track consumer behaviors and associate it with a CRM system. And so they'll know, for example, I think we might have talked about this before, Steve, you're a good customer. You buy a lot of stuff and your rate of return is relatively low. I'm a lousy customer. I'm a bottom dweller. I look for the sales. I return half of everything I purchase. And so why should I have free shipping is the attitude that's starting to emerge. And I think it's a fair question. But as it relates to visibility, I was thinking of visibility as a prelude to sustainability, because one of the things that I wanted to ask you a little bit about are people using the information that has been made available between the retailer, the shipper, and the manufacturer, or the third-party intermediary, to make what I would characterize it as line item decisions about whether it's cheaper to return it or to throw it away. You're starting to see that in the world.
Yeah. I mean, the real innovators of throw it, don't return it are types of Boohoo, ASOS. You know, Primark now are going to start going online.
Are they really?
Yeah. It has to come. They're going to do a click and collect model to start with. So they're going to keep people walking into store for the moment. But the fact is, the sustainability element is, so I've sold someone a young lady, a £5 blouse. It costs me £1.80 to ship it free of charge. Do I offer them free of charge return. That's going to cost me another £1.80. The margin I was making on it was probably about, I don't know, £1. If they return it, I've lost.
Yeah, you're underwater now. So yeah.
Like, you give an option on a portal to say you can keep it no charge. Because the fact is that, honestly, that's what some of these real fast fashion retailers are considering. They haven't done it yet, but they're considering it.
We're hearing a lot of talk about that in our conversations with retailers. But this brings up something in my mind's eye, and maybe it's just the CIO in me. This implies that I know what it costs. So on an item by item basis, I know what the cost structure is, the true cost to serve. Retailers are not very good at that. They roll a lot into cost of goods, and it kind of hides the cost of shipping, the cost of handling, the cost of holding. All of those things are kind of rolled into cost of goods sold. But the true landed cost of any item is not known. So you're implying that they are getting there, or are they just still guessing? Are they just saying, I got a big margin on this and I can afford to lose some of it? How's that working?
So the big margin items, obviously, the likes of, let's use Harrods as an example. Okay.
Good example. Yeah.
High value, they want it returned, and they want it returned as it went out. Okay.
Yeah.
So that is a totally different scenario, because you can't liken Harrods to ASOS.
No. I used to joke, it was in the US, it was Neiman Marcus, but one of the things I used to joke is words you would never hear. The phrase you would never hear is, I got such a deal at Neiman Marcus. You don't hear that. That doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen. But it's just, you've got to weigh up that, do I want to keep this customer as well?
Right. Yeah.
And so if I charge them to return, and Zara took that bold step and said, we are going to start charging for returns. And you know what? They have lost market share over it.
Didn't Tesco take a shot at that?
They jumped it. It's gone. So
it's gone. Okay. Yeah.
But you see, with the portals, so the portal that we have, you can build in a charge. Now it's up to the customer whether they take that or not. So it's a custom decision. Whether you might have 5 carriers that are okay to return the item back to the warehouse or wherever it needs to go to, but some of them are chargeable because they're tracked. Okay, they're tracked with instant pay. So as soon as that first scan takes place, your credit card or debit card will have the money being paid onto it. So there's a reason for doing the charging as well.
Yeah.
I'd rather lose a couple of pounds to know that I'm going to get £500 back on my credit card for an expensive camera lens that I may have bought that is the wrong fit or whatever. So, those sort of things are really important to the consumer. But for the and we'll go back to Generation C now, these guys will buy 20 items and they'll return 18 of them.
Yeah.
And that's where the ASOS model went so wrong. Free delivery, free returns. They actually, in the end, on the return side, started to blacklist people.
So they were doing that. Yeah. Yeah.
They did it. And they said, not going to happen anymore. And,
I'm hearing interesting that when I think about the progression of things that we can recommend that retailers do, the first thing is you need to address the reasons for returns.
Absolutely.
And of these 10 that I listed, there are probably a few more, but the 10 I listed, there are easily 5 that you should be able to deal with. One of them that we talked about was get your website right. Let's do that. Put that true to size measurement that you're starting to see, particularly in fashion, really good. So there's other things that you can do.
And make sure the delivery option is available to them.
That's right.
It's not just a standard, it will arrive in 3 to 5 days. We'd like to offer you next day. We'd like to offer you one.
Give them options. Sure. Give them options. The second one was that I heard you talk about was you got to optimize the other stuff. So pull all the slop out of the delivery cycle And that's just standard good management practice, but there's a lot of technology that brings that you can bring to bear on that. Chief among them is to make every step of the journey visible.
Absolutely.
And if you can measure it, you can start to optimize it. If you don't do it, you can't optimize it. The third one is to start looking at it, and this is where we were starting to get into the fun stuff, was understand the profitability of the return cycle, or let's call it the relative unprofitability of the return cycle, and start to make decisions about what's the best thing to do with a return product.
Correct.
Bin it, send it to the warehouse, get it to the store, do something else with it, but it's all based on what I've characterized, perhaps incorrectly, as an ord line level profitability analysis, which is predicated on visibility.
Absolutely. And the other thing you've just mentioned, returning to store. Now, what do you do? Do you restock store, or does that then go into a batch pickup for return back to warehouse?
Oh, listen to this. This is in our research, and we just published this last week, so I have to read this. I haven't memorized this. We broke the verticals down in fashion, specialty, and brand. That's one vertical, meaning seasonally oriented stuff, hard goods, general merchandise, and fast moving consumer goods, food, right? And we gave retailers a number of choices. One of them was putting it back in the store on a sale rack whenever possible. Fashion and believe it or not, FMCG, fast moving consumer goods, favored that approach more than any other. Almost half of them. Going down the list of other things, putting it back in the store and sell as an open box or a damaged item and discount it if possible. That was very popular with hard goods and general merchandisers. Marking it for online resale only. That was hard goods people, but it's all over the map. And the one thing that they all agreed on, this was hilarious. Not one of the retailers that we queried wants to throw it away.
No.
None of them do. None of them, nobody. But in fact, if they knew the profitability of it, they might do just exactly that.
Oh, absolutely. But it's interesting that we're seeing in the UK, especially, that because of the recession that's going to hit us and everything else, a lot of stores at the lower end are now saying, right, we will not throw this away. We will give it to charity to be reused. Now,
that makes good sense. That makes good sense.
It does. But the thing is, and I mean, you and I spoke about this before, about the sorting centers for returns.
Yeah.
I mean, to put it bluntly, these are hellholes for people.
Well, and that's favored, that particular option was favored by about 20% of fashion retailers. And we did talk about this before. Those places are horrors. They really are. Yeah. And they get the product gets binned up and it gets shipped off to a third world country someplace, and God knows what happens to it after that. But
the trouble is, you see, that we see this thing now where they're called professional taggers. So these Generation Z will actually order an item. They will very carefully unpack it. They will wear it, take the tags off, and then they have a tagging machine at home to re-tag it properly.
No kidding.
In the bag. Now, you might say, okay, well, surely it's only one or two people. Well, I can assure you it's more than one or two people. This is thousands and thousands of people that are doing this because they just want that dress for that one night and they don't want it.
I have to tell you an anecdote from my past, and I'm sorry to waste your time, but
don't be silly.
My very first job in retail was at a high-end women's clothing store in 1970. And one of our most profitable departments was the fur department, when that was still fashionable. And these were extraordinarily expensive, 1/2 and 3/4 length fur coats. And we had to track when the San Francisco opera season opened, because people would come in on a Thursday and they would buy an extraordinarily expensive coat, which cost about as much as the house that I lived in. And my job on Monday was to take the return and to smell for perfume.
Yes.
And if I could smell perfume on the coat, I knew that they'd worn it to the gala.
Absolutely. I mean, I have been to one of these return centers in Poland. And they're disgusting.
They really are.
Disgusting, because people will stand there, they'll unpack this stuff, they'll look at it, and they'll start to grade it. And one of the things they do is they sniff the product.
They sniff the product, yeah.
That is not a great return policy as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And you know, it's certainly something that the fashion industry needs to take a long, hard look at.
Well, just to finish my story, I found it just demeaning for me to do that. But I was just a kid, you know, I was in college and I needed the money. But the other thing was that they knew a sucker when they saw one. I was the one who had to approach the customer and said, "Did you enjoy the opera?"
Good. Yeah, like that one. Yeah.
Yeah. Gee, yeah. Thanks. I really appreciate that. But the problem is that on those redistribution centers, it hasn't really improved. They're really horrifying places. This gets me to the last point I wanted to bring up, and it's actually the next to the last, but it has to do with that profitability thing. Are you seeing retailers start to grade a product for its, let's call it, sustainability factors?
Yeah.
Before the buy button as an option or something for a customer to think about when they're buying?
Yeah, it's something obviously that we don't have a direct impact on because we don't build the websites, but we're seeing that on the websites now. That they are saying, you know, this. So I mentioned this in the D2C thing that we did with a company called Weirdfish that I love to shop.
Right. Yeah.
So their options now, their filters include what the items are made out of. So if it's 100% cotton, if it's bamboo, which seems to be a strange thing to make clothes out of, because I'm always scared that pandas are going to be chasing me down the road. The fact is,
apparently quite soft. It's very nice. It's very nice fabric. Yeah.
You know, they've got all of these different types, and you know, you then as the consumer have that opportunity to choose something that is right for you. So it actually means that you are far less likely to return that item. And that's the good thing about it. And I think what we're doing with the delivery option side as well is that we now have a sustainability button. So as you go through to purchase and you get through to that point of checkout, what are my delivery options?
Right.
Press the sustainability button and it highlights those that are sustainable carriers.
That's where I was going with this, is essentially put this before the buy button so the consumer has a choice. And I'm imagining, you know, red and yellow and green type of things, you know, and something to say, I want
allowed to do that. So we can only show it as green that is an electric vehicle, for instance, that is going to deliver the item to your house.
No, well, that's a start. That's part of the process. The last point I wanted to bring up was, as we chatted about, is scoring customers from the perspective of whether or not let's call it a liberal returns policy should be even offered or not. It sounds good on paper. It sounds like the kind of thing analyst groups would come up with. Talk to me about that as a real option.
For us, it's impossible. Okay, because we control the amount of outbound shipments, okay, and we can give through our intelligence tool, you know, how many outbound shipments have been made, and we can even break it down to address. The issues come, and this is the sensitivity and the world that we live in nowadays of GDPR.
Right.
How much of that information can the retailer use against me?
Very good point. Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
You're bad, you're not going to be able to buy from us anymore.
I live in California. That would probably be frowned upon. Our state is pretty famous for this kind of stuff. Yeah.
But that's an issue. And I'll go back to the ASOS example. ASOS actually did do their analysis.
Right.
That it was costing them millions every year with this free outbound, free returns. So they then started this club where you pay £10 a year and you still get free outbound, free returns, but £10 was never going to cover it.
Right.
So then what they did, they started to look at these perpetual buyers who were buying 20 items, returning 18 of them. And they actually put a block on how many items they could purchase. Now that caused a furore, but that's all died down now.
Yeah. I've heard that. I haven't heard it as a blanket policy, but I've heard some retailers are experimenting with, for example, if you using myself as a customer, if I buy a certain category of merchandise and I have a history of returning a lot of that category, but not much of the other category, this is fascinating. Just don't show me that on the website. Don't show me that category, because my tendency is to buy returnable products.
And what we can do as well through the tracking technology that we have, we've got Google Analytics running in the background. So we can actually see what the buying patterns are as it comes onto the tracking portal.
You know, as in the end of the long day, I'm thinking about it from a systems perspective, because that's what I am, a systems guy. When I was thinking the opportunity to be if you will, a decision-making repository that lives between all these players and helps everybody in that value chain make the right decision for the consumer and for profitability and for sustainability. It requires visibility first, and then it requires good analytics, and it has to be in real time, because you're exposing this to all the players in that, if you will, conversation. So it's an exciting time.
The final point I want to make is that we are seeing this move away from label in a box.
Yeah.
People don't like it because it's another piece of paper that's been printed.
You know, that's interesting, isn't it? Because people are sensitive to that. I happen to be a volunteer at the local Civic Arts Center, and people print their own tickets. And when we go and we scan the ticket, and there are a lot of people who complain, why are you making me waste paper? And at first I thought it was odd. And I thought, well, you know, you're right. There's a couple of thousand people go to this. I just wasted a couple of reams of paper needlessly. Just show me your iPhone, please, and I'll do that.
And that's where the returns on demand is now coming in.
Right.
The returns on demand is go to your local Pudo store with your item ready to return. There's a QR code on your phone. Scan the QR code, it prints out a single small returns label, put it on the package, away it goes. No other paperwork required. It's scanned at that Pudo point. So again, that's the first point of scan. It's on its return journey.
That also brings up the other opportunity, is give the consumer their money back quickly.
Exactly.
Because if you've scanned it in to get into that process, you now know you're going to receive that. And I can't think of anything that makes consumers angrier than to think that their money is being held by somebody else. That will get them every time. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we're going through that in the UK with the electricity and gas companies at the moment, but that's another story for another day.
I was going to say, are we going down that path?
But it is interesting. You know, returns on demand is becoming very popular. Portals are becoming more popular as well, because it is a method of stopping people returning.
Yeah.
I get your point that pre-pandemic, we've got to get out and start going back into the stores. And I think return to store, as long as it's a viable proposition for that particular store, for that to happen, that they can either restock or put back into warehouse, then that's the ideal scenario. But then we go back to the sustainability. Do we want all these cars back on the road?
Right.
And, you know, the pollution that we didn't have for nearly a year and a half.
You know, it's interesting. I mean, the retailers have grabbed onto this because we have to go back to 2017, I think, in the whole so-called retail apocalypse. And retailers suddenly realized that they had too much of the wrong kind of real estate. That's still an issue. Now they've gotten past their fear that stores are going to disappear completely, and they've kind of reimagined the store as if you will, a cog in a big omni-channel order management and fulfillment process. Well, that's really good. I think that's wonderful. But the store has to be in a place that's convenient for the consumer, and you've just redefined what convenience is. So all these stores on Oxford Street, for example, might not be the right store. They could be exactly wrong. But anyway, that's another topic for another day. And
absolutely, which we can. I'd certainly like to discuss that, because that would be a good one.
I think we should get the folks at IORMA to pay for us to do a live stream tour of Oxford Street. What do you say?
Or Fifth Avenue. One of the
Fifth. How about Dusseldorf? Let's go to Dusseldorf.
exactly.
I'm sure they're up for it.
Of course.
Yeah. All right. All right. Well, listen, Steve, it's wonderful to talk to you.
And to
Thank
you.
you for your time, man.
Yeah, and you, Brian. Thanks very much, and I look forward to the next one.
I like it. Okay, we'll talk to you soon.
Take care.
Cheers.